Thanks for joining us on Coast to Coast Pest Talk.
Okay, hit it up.
All right. Welcome back, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in to Coast Pest Talk. I'm your host, Gabe, with Pest Patrol, joined here by Andy Snefsky with Perimetech Pest Management, hailing from Syracuse, New York. Today, we're going to be talking about multi-unit strategies that actually work, as opposed to most multi-unit strategies. Being newer to the industry, I think I've probably experienced some of the, oh my goodness, I have no idea what I'm doing aspect of it, especially when I was first starting out.
Really? Okay. So I'd imagine probably like not on the pest side of the equation, but like on managing, dealing with the bureaucracy and the situation. And
Yep.
okay, tell us about this. I want to hear it.
Well, and I would add, from like a software side, my software had a whole multi-unit element to it that I had never used before. And so I was just treating everything as though it was a single unit. So it was just getting all jumbled when you'd have a big apartment complex that had a bunch of different treatments that needed to be done. So some of it was just like organizational as well on my side.
Yeah, and I think that's an area, you know, touching right at the heart of it is that the organization of like keeping track of what you're doing, when, where, what units, what needs to be done, what has been done, documenting records, all these things. This is where multi-unit housing ends up being like just a beast of a monster to sort of deal with.
Yeah, so we have an apartment complex owned by our local housing authority. And they had, oh man. So like a year ago, we started doing weekly treatments. We did a big clean out of the whole thing. Everything was under control. Started doing weekly treatments, got everything basically good. It's really, really about as bad as it gets in terms of what we've seen so far. And so we were pretty happy with our success rate. And then they stopped, like, 4 or 5 months in, they stopped service. And then had nothing for like 6 months. And now the place is an absolute disaster. And they called us back in and said, can you do another clean out? We're like, are we gonna do this again? So we did it again. So we said, hey, so this, we did about half the units, and it was even worse than the first time.
What scope are we talking? Like how many units are we talking in this facility?
So what we just did, it was last week we did it. That would have been what, like 30 units for that one, and then like common areas, hallways.
Okay.
Random. It's an interesting setup because they have like their units are really small, and then they have like shared bathroom spaces.
Okay. Sure.
So like kind of community bathrooms and stuff. So we treated all those common areas, and then about 30 units.
Oh my God. And what was this for? What was the target organism?
Bed bugs and cockroaches.
Oh,
I mean, exactly what you would have what you would have thought.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think in multi-unit housing, for the most part, bed bugs, roaches, and rodents. That's really the bread and butter of that environment.
What we ran into quickly with that one was the management company didn't do a good job communicating, and then they'd post notices, and the people wouldn't abide by them, or they wouldn't let us into their apartments. It's just like that kind of hassle, you know?
Yeah.
So is that normal at all in the multi-unit world?
Which part? That they post notices and everybody ignores them?
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Really? Okay.
So in my experience, there's some property managers that will be very good about notifying tenants that we're coming and what day and what time. There's some that are terrible and never report, and there's always a percentage of the residents that are going to ignore it or decline access or anything like that. The best scenarios we've run into over time, the tenants, if you're very consistent with it, become accustomed to the process. Like, oh,
Gotcha.
okay, yes, every 3 months they're going to be in to do an inspection and treatment and yada yada. So then they're used to it. We have sort of a fairly specific protocol that we've developed to sort of address this exact problem. Now, success is going to really depend, though, on the relationship between you and the property manager, and that
Yeah.
they're willing to do some of the things that they need to do. With smaller properties with fewer units, we may take over some of that management, contact tenants directly. They'll give us, contact information. We'll contact, but that's on really small scale.
Right.
When you're dealing with, a 300 unit building, it's really not feasible for us to deal with that.
Yep.
So really on the front end, figuring out how big the problem really is, and then coming up with a strategy of attacking it. And in some cases, figuring out how big the problem is part of the problem. Like,
Right.
you have 300 units and the maintenance guy says, oh yeah, we got problems in half of them, or we got problems in 20 of them, or whatever. Okay, you think you do, or you do in 20 of them, but you may have, a huge number that are unreported. And it almost always goes that the worst ones are the ones that aren't reporting most of the time.
Yes.
You'll find those reservoir populations, those little roach bomb apartments that are full. Oh no, they never say anything. Well, yeah, they're spilling them out to everybody else. So we've largely started to sort of ignore those self-assessment reports
Yeah. Yep.
from people. When you talk to the maintenance guy, he may be like, yeah, 95% of our units are totally infested. And then you run through them and their self-assessment is invariably wrong. And
Yep.
you'll find what the truth actually is.
If there's any of our listeners or watchers that are like me, and that when I first started, I didn't have a multi-unit capacity set up in my point of sale. So I was using field routes. I didn't know they had a multi-unit side. And so I was treating everything like single units. Find out how to do that if you're using any of the main software systems, they're going to have that, and make sure you're doing that, because it saves you tons of time. It's way more thorough, way more legal.
Sure.
I mean, sure, you could just put everything out on a notepad and keep it in a file, but having that electronic source is so invaluable.
I think this is kind of the areas where people fall down. Like your run of the mill, say like residential, really good customer service, pest control company that's maybe a couple guys, doing great service, runs into like an administrative nightmare when you start looking at like a 300 unit high rise that's has a complex situation that you got to be able to get a handle on, and provide that sort of support. It gets out of hand immediately, like as soon as you walk in the door, it's can be totally out of hand.
Yep. Would you recommend? So, in my experience, you have the units that are, or the complexes that are really bad tend to get really bad, and you got to be really on top of. And then I have a whole group of what are generally newer build, probably higher income apartment complexes that aren't as crowded. And those I generally am doing just as needed. And sometimes they'll call me out 2 or 3 times a year for their 300 units, right?
Yep.
Do you do that same procedure for all of your multi-unit?
No, there's some apartment complexes that have very few problems. You may have a few ants, you may have whatever. Some of the questions that I will ask up front, I mean, some of them, if it's like, okay, this is public assisted housing authority housing,
right. Yep.
low income housing, you're probably running into problems. And over the years, I've kind of come to the thought that like, it's not a problem of income necessarily, but a lot of times it's a problem of transience of the people in there. So you'll have, say, a 200 unit housing authority building may have 50% of those people that turn over every year. Like 100 of
Yep.
those 200 rooms have new people in them
Oh
every
yeah.
year. And
Yeah.
you go to some of
Easy.
the other apartment complexes that are just standard, apartments and whatnot, and their turnover rate is way lower. So
Yep.
with that, your likelihood of reintroducing problems is a lot lower if you have the longer term the tenant is. You're just going
Right.
to have the problems that those tenants have. If they're not moving in or out, yeah, they can get reintroduced with activity and they find, bed bugs somewhere or whatever. But if you have half your building is turning over and you're taking people from other low income housing situations and moving them in and then out and then the next one in, your chances of getting back to a problem are like nearly 100%.
Right. Yep.
So that's kind of the differentiation there. I'll usually ask people like what percentage do you have turnover every year, to sort of gauge that, because we'll have low income housing that doesn't turn over really bad, and we don't
Mm-hmm.
have nearly the problems. So it's not, that's why I said that the whether it's low income subsidized housing or not isn't really the factor. It's how much they have people turning over in there.
Yeah. Certainly. Yeah, that's a really great point. Um, so you have a subset of them that are going to need that, just largely because of that turnover, they're going to need that constant attention, and then you maybe have a subset that they can be more as needed.
Absolutely, and so those ones we'll put on sort of a different program for those multi units. So some of them, if they're prone towards rodent activity and problems, we'll put them on a rodent maintenance program. A monthly rodent maintenance program. Some of them that have insect issues or issues they want response in each unit, we'll put them on a weekly standing appointment or every other week standing appointment, depending on their need profile, where we'll block out time every single week or every other week. And it's like, second Tuesday of the month is your time, and they'll just batch complaints or work orders to that time. So, like, you'll
Yep.
show up and have 4 or 5 units with, these saw ants, these saw bees and wasps, these saw whatever, pop in there, take care of them.
Yeah, that totally makes sense, and I've experienced that same thing. I'd say most of the newer accounts that we're getting fall in that second category.
Good. Yeah.
Which is really nice. So it tends to just be exterior bait stations, and then we'll do like a set. Hey, while we're out, we can treat up to 4 or 5
Yep.
interiors,
Yep.
whatever. Another issue we'll have is on like we'll have a monthly uh, exterior rodent station, and then we'll give them maybe a set number during that service, and then they'll call and they'll say, "Hey, can you come out tomorrow? We have an emergency," right?
Yep.
And trying to determine, okay, can we reschedule their actual,
Right.
monthly service for that time? And if not, what do you bill them then? Right?
Yes.
Having
Yeah. Yep.
and making sure that that's clear in your
In
bidding
your
and all that.
agreement. Yeah, no, you nailed it. You got this down. So yeah, we have a higher rate if it's a on demand service. So we're there every Tuesday, let's say, and they want us there on a Thursday because something happened. We just have to be there. It's a higher rate to do that apartment unit pricing, to go out
Yep.
for a one off.
Yep.
We had people, boy, years and years ago. It was probably 12 years ago, where we had a homeowners association, and the president of the homeowners association was this old guy, and he thought he would do property management for the whole complex there. And one summer, he would call us literally every single day. So we were going to this one, it was a bunch of like townhouses every single day and be like, okay, there was ants here. And then we're like, okay, do you have any more? Nope, we're good. Next day, oh, we saw some wasps over by this garage.
Yep.
Come back. Okay, anything? Dude, you got to put these together. Nope, nothing. And it was like 3 weeks. And we're like, okay, we're not doing this anymore, man. Like, this is no good.
Yep.
We got to get a handle on this.
Yeah, we've experienced the same thing, and our our per, like, on those ones, it ends up being pretty darn close to as if we were treating like a single family home for a
Yeah.
one-off.
Yeah.
So we really try and incentivize them to, hey, just if you can, batch it in with your other service. In terms of pricing those type of jobs out, for ones that you're going through and having to do, you're saying, hey, you've got 300 units and we're going to hit each of these units, 4 times this year.
Yeah.
For the maintenance side, does that end up being considerably more expensive than doing like we're going to do some exterior stations and then you have up to whatever five
Um,
doors each time we're out?
okay, so yeah, we have some of them that it is significantly more expensive to cycle through them. Some of them we've put them on an on-site rate plan doing this. So
What's that mean?
so instead of coming up with like, okay, let's say we're going to do, I don't know, 30 units per visit weekly,
Okay.
something like that, or 25 units per visit. And going, okay, I think this might take me 2 hours to get through. So I'm going to bill you whatever our rate's 150 an hour. So $300 or whatever it is per week. Okay, that's fine. But what if it doesn't take you that long? Or what if it takes you significantly longer?
Gotcha. Yeah.
So with the ones that have worked out the best, we get them on an on-site rate plan. So the technician shows up, clocks in at the service site. He starts and we bill them per time. So the time
Yep.
that we're on site doing the work. So if we get there and those 30 units take us 3 hours, we bill for 3 hours. Okay, and it depends on the mix of units. You get a whole run of, 29 of the units needed treatment and it was a pain. It takes you a long time. Then you go in 30 units. There's not a single thing in any of them. And
Right.
You burn through those in an hour.
Yeah.
They benefit from that. Because you have a reduced. So the price is variable week to week, and we invoice it monthly. So you batch invoice it for the month. But what we found is that it will naturally have price reductions based on their problem level. So you start out, and where we've done these, the first year might be $50,000 in revenue, or well, I say revenue in cost for them. For that first year, because everything was a problem. You're going through that
Yep.
building every week. It's a mess. You're doing follow-ups. You're doing, tons of things. That you go through a quarter, 2 quarters of that, it starts getting easier and easier. A year later, you're there for half the time. Now they're paying $25,000 a year. Maybe you're getting them down to $15,000. You keep at it. You don't give up and just stay on that program. We've had ones where they did this, like you're saying, they did this for a while, they got it solved and then stopped. Everything a year later, boom, we're back at it. Or we had one that stopped doing this program and just started doing a call-in.
Yep.
Well, why don't you just put out some stations, check for rodents, and then we'll just call you when there's problems.
Yep.
And you start doing whack-a-mole, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. You're
Yep.
not addressing the whole structure. And then they go back on it. Takes about a year. Boom, you're down. The ones that have rebounded like that, they stay on that. Once
Yeah.
they've seen, okay, you're not lying to me. This makes sense, and just stay the course. And then you'll get to sort of the minimum level cost-wise that they should be paying.
Yep.
You're there every week. You're cycling through all the units quarterly. You're keeping tabs on everything, and they're paying whatever 150 a week or something like that, which ends up being reasonable, and ends up there once you have it sort of in that good place. That usually is less than if we had done the whack-a-mole or the
Oh yeah,
unit by
certainly.
unit whatever.
Well, and you actually have the problem under control.
Right. So you have better service results for the tenant, less hassle for the manager, and the right price that's sort of saving the money. But it can take, I usually tell people in my experience, it takes a year to get you from
Yep.
a mess to, okay, this is pretty reasonable.
Yep.
And if you set that expectation up front, then you don't have, trouble with that.
Yeah, that's great. That's good info for me to have even for that trouble account, because I think just communicating expectations to that property manager that like, hey, it really was going great. We stopped. It's a big mess again. We got to stay on this.
Yeah. You can't let up, and because they'll want to be like, when will you have this solved? And the answer is, when are you not going to have people in here? That's when
Right.
it'll be solved. That's when it'll be done, because you're not moving new people in.
Yep.
There's no done, with this sort of job. I tell people, remember that you're sort of in the middle between tenant and landlord.
Yeah.
And try to stay as neutral as you can.
Yeah.
And like, don't throw either one of them under the bus. I know the landlord, the property manager is paying the bill, so they're ultimately the boss. But the tenant can't just see you as being their little minion. Like, you kind of have to be like, I'm a neutral party. I'm here just to help and make things better for you guys. I'm going to work to try to fix this. Because if you're seen as the adversary with the landlord, there could be eviction proceedings or, all kinds of things that are going on. And when you try to, say, take a picture of that kitchen sanitation problem, they're immediately thinking, well, they're looking for evidence and they're trying to pin it on me and this and that, whatever. So just do your best to kind of keep neutral in that.
Yeah. No, that's great. And even, oh man, yeah, that just brings back memories of, we've just had a couple where tenants have taken landlords to court. But yeah, it's always pretty brutal.
It can be. It can be. It's rough.
Yeah.
And what our attorney always says is, you want to have the most important thing you can have is contemporaneous notes.
Yes.
You can have things that you wrote down. Like, we'll a lot of times include with our data collection, it will include the reports of the tenant right then. So on 11/7, tenant reported no activity seen in the previous 3 weeks. And we didn't observe any activity, because what will happen is a week later you'll get a call. They saw a roach and they'll say, "We've always seen they never went away. We've always seen roaches." And if you can point back to be like, "Yes, a week ago we were there. Your report was you had not seen roaches in 3 weeks. We also confirmed we hadn't seen roaches. Monitors didn't have roaches. So are you lying now or are you lying then?"
Yep.
I mean, you have to be sort of that detailed and sort of granular. Anything that the tenant tells me at the time, I will definitely want to notate that.
Yeah. Guys, thanks so much for listening. As always, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and our podcast. And we're getting pretty close to 20 episodes. I think we're 21, 22 here. And don't forget to join our LinkedIn Coast to Coast Pest Talk group, because it's going down in the Coast to Coast group. Thanks for listening.